So we can start the show. I'll just start talking about my weekend. Ran around yesterday, Manhattan, filmed a lot of stuff, getting a new 35 millimeter look happening for the next movie.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Panasonic cameras are good for that. I saw that with a tiny Panasonic camera, and then I got a prosumer ENG type, the Panasonic X1500 camera, and that did really well. It's that camera is not good at night, so I'm about to test out a Canon XA40. Maybe that could be the ideal camera for the next shoot, but we'll see. But either way, with each test, I'm figuring out how to do grain and color better so that we can have a very nice 35 millimeter type look for the next movie.
So, are you going to be doing? Are you having different cameras for the different needs, or are you trying to find one camera that can take care of any situation?
Ideally, one camera for any situation, and also smaller than what I've been using and more
Mm.
fun. Because the previous camera I had, it's nice, but it was kind of big. It was not a lot of fun to just grab and go and shoot stuff. So I'm trying to scale down a bit size wise. So the Canon XA10 might no XA40 might work. The Panasonic X1500 will definitely work for daytime. I'm trying to figure out some good nighttime options. That sensor is not as good at night, but it could work. And there's a bunch of other cameras to look at, but uh, the goal is to start filming dialogue scenes early next week. So I'm gonna wrap up my camera testing stuff like tomorrow.
Wow. All right. And
Every
this is
year in winter, I seem to test out cameras.
well, things are a little bit different every year.
Hmm.
Um, and that's cool. So this is the 53 spaceships is about to like officially get underway.
Already underway. A lot of scripts are being worked on. I have over 1 hour of B-roll footage. Now we're about to start shooting the A-roll stuff, which is going to be dialogue, conversations. I'm gonna have to shave, look like switch into the Detective Renee mode, and cut my hair maybe, get some new clothes. So looking forward to it.
It's interesting because I've never thought of it before, and you just said something. You said A roll, which is, I imagine the main action, the main dialogue, as you say.
Mhm.
I've always heard of B roll, the stuff that you're trying to get, the kind of incidental things, but I've never heard A roll before. Is that an actual thing, or is that something you just came up with?
Yeah, obviously, if there's B-roll, then there's A-roll. It's just when people say B-roll, they refer to the B-roll stuff. Then it's assumed that everything else is A-roll.
I know. I've never heard A roll, I guess, said out loud before. It's always one of those things I feel is kind of implied.
Yeah, it's always implied. I mean, once you say B, then rest of it
Right.
is the non-B stuff, right? So I call it A-roll, and I think other people use that term also.
All right.
But it's a real thing, obviously. Everything else. You could have a C track, less important, inserts or whatever. You could have D, maybe even more, but definitely there's an A and a B for
What
most movies.
what would be Z roll?
That could be, like a layer of thoughts that a character has. That's like 20 layers down the main story, something like that. Like someone, you know, it's a Mission Impossible type show, but the main character is also a fan of ketchup bottles. So while all the action is happening, he notices the ketchup bottle, so he takes a second to take a look at it,
I
and,
like
and
it.
that could come in as a running thread.
I think you've just created something here, Sujewa. This is
Zero.
exciting. Yeah, Z-roll. Well, we're not here to talk specifically about Z-roll tonight.
That's right. BitterSweet. Woo! New
Yes, we are
movie,
talking
Steve
about.
Martini.
Yeah, it's yes, as you mentioned, bittersweet, written and directed by Steve Martini, and it's having a premiere this coming Friday on Valentine's Day,
Mhm.
as part of the was it the DC Independent Film Festival in
Yeah, DC
Washington.
Independent Film Forum, I think, is the people who are putting it on.
Yeah, that's going to be at the Regal Gallery Place in Washington D.C. and
Mhm.
Steve Martini is going to be there along with some of the cast and crew. So it's going to be a pretty cool night, and we're going to talk about the movie that is going to be shown on Valentine's Day.
Where
Um,
is Regal Gallery Place? Because that sounds like, it's in Georgetown. If so, that's where I showed my movie,
oh,
first movie.
all right.
Where is that? Go ahead, keep talking. I'm gonna just look up something.
This is an example right now of Z-roll, but no,
This is
the
C, maybe C or D.
okay, yeah, it's not quite ketchup packets, but it is still important, but not as
Yeah,
important as the
actually, this
A
is in
story.
Chinatown. It's in Chinatown. It's, not
Oh,
where I've shown near Chinatown, uh, but, it's not Georgetown. I showed, my first movie, Wild Diner in Georgetown, and that ran for about a week, and we made a little bit of profit that week. 16 millimeter movie, wacky movie. You've never seen it. It's on VHS. I'll have to find you a copy.
yes, you will. We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah,
Well, I want to see your first
the
film.
cinematographer of that, it was his first gig shooting a feature. We took his name off the credits because, there was a lot of crazy stuff happening that we couldn't control. But he went on to become a big famous indie cinematographer, Sean Williams. He shot stuff for, like, I think he shot for the Safdie brothers, a bunch
Whoa,
of other people. Yeah,
nice.
Williams. Yeah, I haven't talked to him since, but um, I know he's out there working.
Very cool. Well, Steve Martini has also, I mean, he's been in and around the business for a long time, but this is his first kind of solo writing, directing, acting gig, and it's a very it's weird to say about this movie, but it's a very personal story. It's
Mhm,
about a guy living in LA, and he has autism, and his life is completely turned upside down. And through a series of kind of unfortunate events and misunderstandings earlier in the movie, he and his wife end up in this crazy custody battle, and the heart of the action is him trying to get his life together, get his family back, and sort of clear his name in a system that, as the opening title card mentions, is not equipped to necessarily handle a person with his needs. I gotta say, I've never seen a title card work or do so much heavy lifting in a movie, because as the film went on, I kept coming back to this would be a completely different film if the table hadn't been set with that title card, and I'm
mhm,
not quite sure how I feel about that.
mhm,
I'll just say this, like, you know, a lot of movies that are put on television now, they have these disclaimers in front, talking about, this movie deals with historical periods in which racial sensitivities were not as well considered, or something like these kind of trigger warnings for audiences.
mhm,
This movie kind of opens with that same thing, saying this is a movie about Sam, a man with autism, and it pretty much summing up what I just said. And I feel like that's interesting. I wasn't quite sure why I was reading that at the beginning of this film, because usually a movie will let you know what it's about as you watch it. But as the movie goes along, and I don't know how true to life these events are, it's a very wacky film that kind of changes points of view, and gets very metaphorical in some places visually. But I kept thinking, if that disclaimer hadn't been there, I could have thought this movie is just about a guy who's like a man child and kind of a jerk. And I'm not quite sure if I'm supposed to be on his side.
mhm.
Towards
So
the end of the movie, well, just towards the end of the movie, I am on his side, and I'm very much rooting for him and his family. But it took a while for me to get there.
mm, when I so Steve and I know from the internet, from YouTube, I mean, from Twitter, etc. Um, so because we're interested in film stuff, we've stayed in touch over the last couple of years, I think.
Hmm.
And so I do film promo stuff. So he said he's got this new movie. Some shows are happening. I said, let me take a look. I'll help promote it if possible. So I watched the movie, and one of my first responses was, it's a good movie. Obviously, it's shot well and an interesting, funny story. One of my first responses was maybe take a look at how the information about this being an autism related movie is released to the audience. Maybe I think you have to decide either it's going to be a work of entertainment or it's a work of autism related activism, right? So
Right.
if you are telling people like is it a wacky comedy or is it Schindler's List, right? W- once once the table is set, as you said, people will switch their expectations, right? So I think it's better for this movie if the autism angle is, a low level factor and not this is they shouldn't be selling it as this is an autism movie, right? It's about a bunch of other things. So anyway, those were my comments to something like that was my comments to Stephen, and he said he's going to take a look at that about how that information is presented, so that title card might change. I mean, there are many ways to, you know, I think it would have been better to, and maybe, I mean, I saw the movie about a month ago, and I've been watching a bunch of other movies since then. Maybe did you catch a scene where the character's autism is discussed within the movie?
Yeah, and that's the it's tricky because I mean the movie's done, it's premiering.
Right,
Obviously
right.
people have seen it and liked it and we're encouraging people to check it out. I certainly am. I'm not saying I'm recommending the movie fully, but I do think it is worth watching partially for what we're discussing right now
Mhm.
is,
There's lots of
the
interesting ones.
right, but also the way an artist chooses to engage the audience with material, right?
Mhm,
Um, there are, from what I remember, two mentions, one specifically of autism and the other of our main character, Sam, played by Steve Martini, having some kind of a spectrum disorder or, kind of a mental I was going to say mental challenge. That sounds terrible, but something he's been grappling with his whole life, right?
right.
Um, but the only I think overt mention of autism beyond that title card is a kind of a flippant line that doesn't get investigated.
Mhm.
And it's later in the movie because someone who he's dealing with one of the social workers, and pardon this might be some sensitive language here, but I'm giving a trigger warning. Uh, the social worker it's mentioned that Sam has autism, and the social worker says, "Well, I mean, Hitler had autism too." And I'm like, "That's a really interesting joke."
Mhm.
It talks about the insensitivity of the social worker and all that, but it also kind of opens up this question of, how much bad behavior, how much irresponsible behavior, because there are millions and millions of people walking around out there. A lot of them are, there are people just trying to get along. There are criminals. There are people who do crazy things in public. How much
Elon
of that?
Musk, people are
Huh?
saying he's got some sort of a mental issues.
Well, no, I mean Elon Musk has also been, diagnosed with autism, right? But that's also kind of a very good point because you wonder how much how much are we willing to let go
Mhm.
because someone has a condition?
Right.
Because if you could say Hitler had autism, that guy was saying it in a kind of a flippant way, but it's also a tracking back to what the audience might feel if that title card, again, we're not at the beginning of the movie and you were watching it and there was a very quick mention of, oh, this guy has been struggling with some kind of mental issues, and then later he claims to have autism, it could almost seem like a punchline,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, okay, let's just investigate how we meet our character Sam. He's an early scene, he's at home, he's using Wi-Fi that he can't afford, that he's stealing from his neighbor, he's smoking dope while he's babysitting his infant son who's in the next room. There's all this stuff that is going on that is inexcusable behavior.
Mhm.
But because I read this title card 5 minutes ago, I'm like, oh well, I guess he's got a condition, but the condition is not the centerpiece of the movie. It's not really dealt with. This is not specifically an autism film,
Right.
except there's this line in the beginning. It's like, well, I guess we just kind of have to understand. Whereas if this hadn't been in there, you might watch the movie and be like, why do I care about this guy? He's doing everything to deliberately screw up his life, and he looks to be about 40 years old. You
Mhm.
know?
Well, let's imagine we didn't see the autism title card, right?
Right.
The movie would still work for me. I know lots of people who are either diagnosed or undiagnosed with various illnesses who have crazy lives, but who are also trying to make art. And I know some really high level successful people who make some really bad life choices, maybe motivated by some illness, maybe, who knows, right? Why do people do self destructive things? um, Sam Harris, the neuroscientist,
Oh yeah.
his exact title, and also Buddhism would say, and Sam Harris is into Buddhism also. Buddhism would say, and Sam Harris is, brain science would say, you know, people are ultimately not responsible if their behaviors being driven by some mental issue. I mean, there's a level of responsibility that everyone needs to have in order for society to function. But I was just thinking of someone on the other end, Woody Allen, right? A genius level filmmaker. I mean, by foes and friends alike, forever. He's been lauded as a highly creative person. I
Hmm.
read that one year, before he was famous, he wrote 10,000 jokes and he sold them to comedians in New York.
Yeah.
So that's an insanely high level of productivity, super focused, whatever. But he made some life choices that make it super easy for his enemies and detractors to say, listen, we don't want to deal with this guy. We don't want to sell his movies. We don't want to finance his movies. This guy comes with a bunch of troubles, right? So then there's lots of other filmmakers who lead, very different lives, normal lives, don't do crazy things that, get them in trouble. So the question is, if you have an illness or anything self-destructive that you might do, is it coming from an illness? Are you really responsible? So this is a big giant topic on what are individuals responsible for in society. But to go to the movie, even if I think that title card maybe should be redone and focus on the fact that this is a story, a comedy about a guy who's having a lot of problems. Also, he has autism, so that's an aspect of it. But yeah, the title card came off to me as a little too strong, like a Lifetime type, cost type movie. Then I'm like, all right, so am I supposed to judge it as a normal movie, or am I supposed to give it all kinds of discounts and breaks because this is about a special case?
Yeah, and that's I want to make clear. I'm not talking about the filmmaking or the people involved in it. I mean, I think it's a well put together movie.
Mhm.
My problem
Great.
strictly comes with, what it's trying to say, how it's trying to say it, and but here's the thing. I mean, you first of all, I think everybody has some degree of mental illness.
Mhm.
It is like everything else. There's a spectrum, right? Um, but I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about art because you mentioned Woody Allen. It's a great point. I'm a fan of his work, not necessarily a fan of what I know of his personal life, but also
Mhm.
that's been
Yeah.
litigated for decades in the courts, both in the legal system and the court of public opinion. So who knows who's telling the truth?
Mhm.
But ultimately this movie is not about an artist. It's about a guy who's a computer programmer, right? And so when I'm watching a movie about a guy who, I mean, just on the basis of me being a parent, right? He's at home, he's in charge of this infant kid, and yet he's, smoking dope in the other room. He's not paying attention to anything. There's a scene later where he and his wife go out and have sex in the backyard, again, leaving the baby in the house and they fall asleep and then when they wake up like the cops have been called, right?
Mhm.
And when I'm watching this movie, I know it's supposed to be a wacky comedy and everything, but I'm like, yeah, child services needs to step in because
Right.
neither of these people is being responsible. I don't find this to be funny and I barely find it to be entertaining, possibly because of that title card, because that's still doing a lot of heavy lifting. I'm waiting to see, okay, maybe this movie is going to be, because it's ostensibly about autism, we're going to get into the history of Sam and this diagnosis and what that means. This movie isn't very flattering to people with autism,
Mhm.
because, as is the autistic spectrum, some people manifest things differently. I mean, I hate to bring up Rain Man, but it seems to
Right.
be the big pop cultural touchstone of when this issue first kind of came onto the stage in a big way back in 1988. I mean, you look at Dustin Hoffman's character, he's kind of introverted and shy, and he's, he thinks a very specific way. And then on the other side of that, you've got Sam, who's a complete maniac in some regards. And I don't know what this movie is trying to say about how we're supposed to engage with people with autism. That Hitler line, you could just as easily excuse, like, oh, natural born killers. Mickey and Mallory, they went across the country murdering people. They also had a mental condition. They had autism too. It was just undiagnosed. Oh, Bonnie and Clyde, yeah, bank robbers, murderers. It was so unfair that they got gunned down at the end because no one cared about their autism. I'm not saying that they had any of these, conditions, but I'm saying, as a film goer, as a movie goer, when I'm sitting down to watch this, I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to characters based on whether I think they have some kind of a mental
Right.
condition, unless the movie is specifically about that, because otherwise I can write off any terrible behavior.
Yeah. I mean, to move on to other subjects, yeah, the filmmaker should take a look at how that information is presented. I mean, this is a perfect time. You're showing it at festivals and special screenings. There might be some kind of a New York City release. We're still looking at that, and this is a good time to fine tune how certain information is presented. In movies like Clerks, like Manhattan, even some Tarantino movies, big changes were made after the first screenings and early responses from various people. So, yeah, I think the movie works fine as an interesting comedy drama without it being an autism movie. And if the filmmaker wants to share that information with the audience, it should be, a minor aspect of the movie, because in the actual movie, it's a minor aspect. It's barely talked about.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is I've been kind of beaten up on it, right? But ultimately, as I mentioned, at the end of the film, it does have, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it does have a resolution that I found kind of charming, in some cases, in some ways heartwarming. There is one, I think, stroke of genius that Martini pulls off here, and this is a minor spoiler, but it's just something to watch out for. I'll tiptoe around it,
Hmm.
but aside from some of the kind of oddball situations, which makes me wonder if some of this is supposed to be subjective, like from Sam's point of view, and not necessarily real life. There is one, it's the way that the family and childhood court is presented in the film. And that's all I'll say. I don't want to give it away, but it's something to do with the aesthetics of
Hmm.
how it's presented.
Hmm.
I thought was so on it was both on the nose, but also the best way to present this,
Hmm.
because you had adults dealing with this very terrible situation in an environment that kind of underscores what this whole thing is about.
Hmm.
And I just wish that the rest of the movie had had that kind of attention to those kind of meta details. Like, imagine approaching the autism situation, that story, like digging into that with that level of creativity, instead of it just kind of being a throwaway thing or a title card. Um, there's another scene I thought that was really brilliant, where Sam ends up, he loses his lawyer in the custody, fight, and has to find another attorney. He gets recommended this guy
That
who's
was
sort of
funny.
he was like sort of a men's rights activist
Right.
named Zeke Zimmerman,
Hmm.
played by William Baldwin. And he gives this speech up on stage, which is a direct callback to his brother Alec Baldwin's famous speech, the "Coffee is for Closers" speech from Glengarry Glen Ross. And it's a perfect companion piece. And I don't know how much of that was improv or how much this came directly from Steve Martini, but that 3 minutes or whatever it is, as they say, peak cinema.
Right, right. Yeah, I was wondering why those scenes were taking place at that type of location, but then I thought, yeah, they're trying to say something about that whole system, right? but yeah, there. Let's talk about some good things about the movie.
Yeah.
That kind of clever writing, and maybe there are scenes that were filmed, and also it wouldn't be that difficult for Steven to create a scene between his character and his wife and his wife character. You know, little scene talking about the autism thing to put it in perspective in relation to everything else as to how the audience, to cue people in on, like, it could be a scene like, I mean, this is, everyone could ignore this. This is just us talking. It could be a scene like, his wife accuses him of something. He's like, well, I have autism. Then she could be like, well, you also got all these other things done. So clearly autism is not stopping you from doing that. So that kind of a little fight that you have with your partner, right? When you're trying to get away with something. Everyone who's in a relationship or a marriage knows about these situations. So that kind of thing could also, the character may not know to what degree autism is responsible for some of his behavior
Hmm.
versus bad life choices, bad philosophy, bad views on life that, or either they took on willingly or they were forced into, taking on due to influence from family and friends, lifestyle, career, whatever. So yeah, however it's done, the autism angle needs to be presented in a better way so it doesn't kill the comedy, it doesn't kill the drama, it doesn't kill the movie. What I told Steven, and I'm telling everyone now, this movie, let's say we take out the autism title, without that, it reminds me of Flirting with Disaster by Ben Stiller. Do you know that movie?
I have not seen that in 25 years. I think that
Oh,
came out in 96 or 98, but
mhm,
I
mhm.
remember seeing it I think 96, I think. I saw that in the theater.
Me too.
Man, yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, this movie has that kind of wildness, right? It's, I mean, Stiller's character in that movie is much more put together, but in this character's in Martini's movie, he's trying to resolve a family situation essentially, right? So, but all these wacky things get in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's the key difference is you talk about another Ben Stiller movie, Meet the Parents,
Hmm.
which is, trying to resolve crazy family issues, but they're crazy family issues that are sort of incidental. Like all of the problems that Sam encounters in this movie are due to things that he has done. They're the consequences of actions. Now, whether or not they are, we're right to pass any kind of judgment or whatever, he is the catalyst for his own undoing and then having to rebuild, to get his life back. I think that stuff is very, very well handled. In fact, it's kind of perfect. I don't know if it was a coincidence that this is showing on Valentine's Day
Hmm.
because towards the end, I mean, it does show a marriage that of a couple that has problems, and then there's this giant kind of bomb that's thrown into the middle that exacerbates everything. But through it all, you can tell that they still do really love each other, and they want to get back to a place where they can even start to mend the problems they had before this big problem was introduced. And it's very sweet. There's a scene or kind of a through line involving, again, no spoilers, but involving $600 and what you do with that money and what it comes to mean to Sam's character from the early part of the film where that particular dilemma is introduced to the way he resolves that situation at the end. It's very sweet.
Hmm. Um, Now, what kept me going past the autism title, past the you know sections of the movie that I wasn't, super entertained by, was the cinematography. So, indie filmmakers, friends and enemies, make your movies look very good. So, if it looks good, if it's edited well, performances are good. I mean, it's put together well. People are at least obligated to watch it all the way through and go, well, I'm going to watch it because it looks good. And I had the same reaction to my own movie, Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, when I was editing it. I was like, wow, the cinematography turned out way better than expected. So I could do slow cinema with this movie. We could watch this character walking around for 5 minutes at a time because black and white, New York, the way it's shot, it looks good. So
And the music, do not discount the
right,
music too. That was a big part of that.
right. So when anyone in the indie film world works on a movie to promote it, show it, whatever, we're not doing it for the money. There isn't a lot of money in the indie film world, right? So the work has to be very interesting. The filmmaker has to be interesting. Also, the filmmaker has to be promotable. So don't do crazy Woody Allen things and don't do crazy, you know, taking your politics against the film studios or the public type stuff that makes you unpromotable. But make sure the movie looks good. So let's talk about cinematography. I thought it was amazing. I thought that it looked like a regular, large scale Hollywood type movie.
It's funny because I had a conversation with another filmmaker last month, Vivian Kerr, who did a movie called Scrap.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons we're talking about BitterSweet is because you brought it up as one of your most interesting independent films of 2024, which was our topic last month, right?
No, no, Bittersweet is not on there. But
Yeah, we talked about it.
I did mention it during that conversation.
Yeah,
Bittersweet,
we talked.
go ahead.
We did talk about it. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's not on the
Uh,
list of most.
well, okay, but we did talk about it on that show, I should say.
Yes, yes.
And that was sort of the catalyst for this conversation. But I mentioned Scrap, Vivian Kerr's film, which also was an independent film shot and set in LA, and it also looked like $1 million. It shot on a very low budget, but it doesn't look like it, and both these are kind of companion piece films. Not only that, but they both open with the same shot, pretty much, or the same scene of the main character waking up in a car, because of some crazy circumstances that have happened to them. It was very odd watching watching both of these movies within a month of each other and noting the similarities. Both are very LA,
Mhm.
but you're right. This is, I don't know. Do you have any idea what the budget was in this thing?
Well, as a filmmaker who's working at the moment, the cinematography tech has improved so much now that any, you know, film of any budget can have an amazing Hollywood look now. So I have no idea what the exact budget was, but we know it's probably not in the millions, but it's probably a lower budget indie movie. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. The filmmakers now are able to create amazing looks. I took a $600 consumer camera, shot some stuff in Manhattan, color graded it. I was like, wow, this looks super cinematic. So yeah,
Well, and that's
good.
Well, that's why I bring it up, because I think the budget does matter. Just in this, not the specific numbers, but I'm just talking about the idea of there's someone out there who really has an itch to make a film,
Sure.
and they see a movie like Bittersweet, and they think, "Oh my gosh, this guy's got a Baldwin in it. It
Oh,
looks
right, right.
really expensive. It's shot in L.A., which can be a really expensive place to shoot in. There's no way I'm a Los Angelino
Oh,
and I can make my own movie."
yeah,
So but what you're saying is, if you can find a decent used kind of prosumer camera
yes,
and you've got any modicum of talent and eye, you
yeah.
don't need all the resources in the world. Now my question to you is, how much of making a movie look like this is down to the camera and the person wielding it? Because I'm also thinking about lighting and audio and all that stuff. Like, can you guerrilla style get something that looks this good, or do you need, some kind of a heftier crew?
So to answer the budget question, the official budget they're promoting in some of the promo material, I think, is 400,000. Uh,
Wow.
but I don't know. See, film budgets for those who are not filmmakers, all film budgets are somewhat fake in the sense that there's the hard production expense, then there's other stuff, development, financing, distribution stuff that needs to be covered, that studios add on money, also indie filmmakers add on money because there are real expenses and there's profit that you need to try to cover a little bit from the budget if possible. So who knows? But let's say it's under a million, somewhere in the 100,000 to a million range, right? But so that's one answer. But the other thing is you need a talented cinematographer, or you need to be a filmmaker director who has some talent with the camera. Uh, you could shoot something like BitterSweet, have it look good using all natural light. You don't need a giant, you know, because the cameras are so sensitive now. If you have like a 1 inch sensor or higher, and the camera that was used on BitterSweet most likely has a larger sensor. Even a 1 inch sensor like the one that I used on Renee movie, I took it out to any street. You know, when I take it out to any street corner in Brooklyn, just with like one light in the background, the whole place is lit up like daytime. So I have to bring it into my editing, bring it down, bring it down, bring down the light, because these cameras and sensors are so sensitive now. And that leads to a related problem of filmmakers assuming what they see on their high-end $100,000 cameras, what they see out of it is what people at home will be able to see it. So you end up with, like if you're looking at a pro camera, even a 5,000 to $100,000 camera, uh, the image you get on set, uh, it's going to be so sensitive to light. You're going to be able to see everything, and then you have to cover it up using various devices and in post work, right? But by the time that gets compressed and released to the home audience on whatever platform or YouTube, that advantage may be fully gone. So you got to light, you have to make the night scenes. You got to have some illumination, not just natural light for the night scenes. That's how we're ending up with scenes that people can't see, because the tech that the filmmakers are using shows all the stuff really well on that end. When it comes out, it's all gone.
That makes so much sense now, because I keep seeing these comparisons on X. You know, people will show, why does Spider-Man look so much better, you know, the movies 15 years ago than they do now, and they'll show like a nighttime scene from then, a nighttime scene from a couple years ago, and you almost can't make anything out. You'd have to bring that still into Photoshop and amp up the brightness just to tell. You know, I understand what you're saying, not completely from a technical standpoint because I'm not a filmmaker, but the camera that I'm using right now, this Elgato, is I'm very bright on the screen right now. If anyone were to look, like, just to be in the actual basement I'm in right now, it's dank and dark. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know how this thing is getting so much light on me, but nothing here looks like this.
Yeah, it's the sensor and the tech, and I saw that with the Panasonic X1500 also. It has a tiny sensor, but the tech in it is so advanced. It's uh, it's making the sensor work like a much larger sensor, gathering lots of light and creating a look that's pleasing and viewable to you. So 15 years ago, if they were shooting that movie on motion picture film, you have to light, a lot to get great images. Now with the cinema camera, you could take it out to any street, and on set you will be able to see everything with just available light, right? But once that gets edited and processed down to home release, you may lose that advantage because you're not looking through pro cinema cameras and pro cinema editing gear when it comes out to YouTube and to HBO.
Yeah, man,
But
I
it's
love this.
great. Overall, it's great. The new tech is so much better.
Yeah, and I love these mini film lessons. This is so much fun.
This is
But yeah,
this is the Z. This is the Z roll. But
now
yeah,
come on, this is at least K or M. Come on.
yeah. Well, some of the things that filmmakers know, we don't really get a forum to talk about. It's important for critics and audiences to learn about this stuff because it affects. Some of the choices you see in the movies are driven by modern tech capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a scene in an attic later on that it's I'm not sure where they shot that or if they built like kind of a small set or something. It didn't quite look like an attic that I've been up in, but I believed it. But also, you mentioned the lighting and the way that it looked. It looked just dark enough that it was supposed to be a dark room, but I could tell everything that was going on. Yeah, it was very impressive.
So
But again, also the set kind of related to, the cinematography, the production design, is specifically that set that I mentioned that I don't want to give away, but the courtroom was
yeah,
I just felt like I could pause the movie and just like look at all the details and all the stuff that was kind of flowing through that set, the entire room. Really, just do like a 360 pan and see how they thought this out. It's kind of an easy throwaway concept that they executed with the utmost care, and I was we go back to that set a few times during the film, and every time I perked up. I'm like, oh, what's there to look at over in that corner?
yeah, the production design is great, cinematography is great, sound work, the actual filmmaking is really good. Um, Acting is good, uh, good to great. Steve Martini is a charismatic actor, character, and everyone else does a great job. Um, and famous people showing up, like the Baldwin brother. That's good. I ran into that guy at an airport in New York. I was dropping off my girlfriend when she was flying off some early morning to visit her dad, and William Baldwin, right? That
Yeah,
icon.
yeah.
Yeah, he was there getting on a plane, but he had some time to kill. I was having breakfast. We sat down and chatted for like 10 minutes or so about film. He might remember if he sees this. He'll be like, "Oh, it's that guy from the airport." I think it was LaGuardia, maybe 5 years, within 5 years or so ago.
Oh, so this okay, I was gonna say, was this in relation to this around the timing of this movie, but this is a
Completely
coincidence, that's
different,
great.
random
Yeah.
New York encounter, and every New Yorker has these. I mean, you run into all kinds of people randomly, and people are chill. I mean, every famous person I've met just at a cafe or walking down the subway or whatever, they're chill. I mean, if you're like a normal person and you talk to them in a normal way, they're chill.
Nice. You mentioned the cast, Gabriella Kuleif, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She plays, Gigi, who's
Mhm.
Sam's, kind of beleaguered wife, in the film. No, sorry, not wife, girlfriend, and that's one of the kind of the side stories is they do have a kid together, they've been living together, but Sam refuses to kind of pop the question, and that creates some tension in the relationship. But I thought she was very good,
Mhm.
and it
She
turns
is
out that
she's very good.
yeah, and they're married in real life.
Mhm.
I didn't know that, and she was one of the producers on the film, so it's a real kind of partnership throughout. I'm very curious to find out because, again, going back to that title card, I think it said something like, not this is based on a true story, but like there are some, based on some actual situations or something. So I'm just curious to see, like, to know what kind of wackiness was pulled from the real experiences and put into this movie.
Well, Steven is interested in coming on the show and talking about the movie. There was a family weekend. I mean, we're recording this on a Sunday. There was a family weekend trip that was pre-planned, and he's on it now. And
Hmm.
reception is not great, so he wasn't able to come on. But I'm sure we can get him on a show in the future for a segment and talk about, ask these questions that we have about the film needs to be promoted anyway, so I'm sure he'll be up for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an open invitation for sure. Um, but I mean, like, we've talked about a lot. Is there anything like major that we haven't covered here in regards to Bittersweet?
Well, I saw the movie um, right after or right while the LA fires were happening.
Mm,
Um, so, so one line of thinking I have is LA movies made prior to the fires kind of maybe not this movie because maybe they didn't shot in those locations. But I think all of LA has changed now because so much damage happened and there's reverberations, going out from that. People
oh
losing
yeah.
their cameras, people can't shoot, people can't finish projects, all their hard drives are burned down. Um, so this movie and other movies that were done prior to the fires may be a different set of movies than what we'll get down the road because you know just the world in LA has changed. It's like this is like a almost like a 9/11 type event. Maybe not that drastic because that involved international war, but it's certainly a life altering event.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we were talking because, I mentioned Spider-Man. There's the kind of famous early trailer for Spider-Man that had him stopping criminals, and a helicopter of bank robbers getting stuck in a web between the 2 towers that was eventually kind of buried because of what happened.
Hmm.
And now when you watch old movies that have New York in them, you see that kind of iconic skyline. It's kind of chilling and strange. So, yeah, this BitterSweet might be in that cadre of kind of time capsule movies that people look back on like, yeah, that's not there anymore. Or that's very different now than it was when this was a thing.
Yeah, as this movie comes out this year and beyond, that's I think a thing that people are going to think about the LA fires. Um, it's interesting that you mentioned the waking up in the car thing. I think that sounds like a very much an LA thing because in a Brooklyn or Manhattan movie, that's not going to happen because most people don't have cars here.
Hmm.
It's just not. It just doesn't make any sense for most people to have cars here. It's too much of a hassle. So I mean, also I'm thinking back to like Tarantino movies. Um, what was the recent one? The 20th century or whatever. The what was the most
One
recent?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, mhm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff happening in cars,
Yeah.
throughout that movie. So that seems like a very LA aspect with the movie that you mentioned, plus Bittersweet. Yeah, so this is a LA movie, shot really well. So if for nothing else, check out the movie for the cinematography, and it shows what's possible now for on a low budget indie movie. Um, Actually, the acting is good. Humor, I mean, it's a comedy, so you know you'll have to get used to his style. Every filmmaker, every comedian has a style, and it's not the same from person to person. So you'll have to figure out what they're serious about and what they're just being funny about, and get used to the style. But yeah, it has a unique kind of big, you know, comedy style, and so that's interesting. So not like it's not like a Hong Sang-soo or a Jarmusch type minimalist minimalist indie movie. This is an indie movie that has, some mainstream flavors to it, but still it's about a character, his struggle, the struggle of the little family, and it's about you know, I guess it's a little bit about just trying to, grow your life and get things organized. Even though the character is not an artist, in most indie movies, the lead character, may be an artist while they're trying to deal with their family and life issues. But yeah, it's a good. So that's what I was thinking. That this is kind of like flirting with disaster. It's a good, wacky movie, well made about a guy with a lot of problems trying to get something done. Lots of things get in the way.
Yeah. And, again, it's kind of a bumpy road for me personally. I think if I were to watch it again, this happens with a lot of films, because you watch any movie, you're never sure what it's going to be unless
Right.
it's a sequel or a Marvel film. And so sometimes it's a little bit rough going, but once you get through it, you think, well, when I watch this again, knowing what I know now, knowing how it ends up, if I even want to watch it again, I'll at least be in the frame of mind of kind of having that trust
Hmm.
that the filmmaker is going to kind of bring the plane in for a smooth landing. So yeah, but folks can check it out again. Valentine's Day, bring a loved one, even if that loved one is a friend.
Right.
To was it DC? Help me out with this. I've got it written down. It's Regal Gallery Place in Washington D.C.
Hmm.
It's part of the DC International Film Festival and or Film Forum. I've
Right.
seen two different
Yeah,
listings.
Google it. Google Bittersweet DC screening, and you'll
Nope.
get the link.
No need to do that because I'm putting the link right
Below.
down there to the
Right.
Eventbrite tickets. It's got the address, the email. You can buy the tickets right there.
Modern
And
tech.
Steve, yeah, right. Um, and yeah, Steve's going to be there.
Yeah.
along with it says select members of the cast and crew. I don't know who all that's going to be, so probably some fun surprises. And yeah, go check it out. And thank you, Sujewa, for like kind of recommending this movie and putting it on my radar. I think this has been a very interesting discussion uh, because I got to talk out some of the things that were kind of
Mhm.
bothering me about the movie, but also the fact that despite all that, Martini won me over in
Right.
the end. So I was able to uncross my arms about halfway through and be like, I get this. I like these characters. It's a little bumpy, but that's fine.
Yeah, better that than, a completely miserable indie art house movie or a completely favorless Hollywood movie that you're like, after 5 minutes, you're like, okay, I know where this is going. I've seen it. Thanks. Um,
Were you over my shoulder this afternoon when I pre-ordered my Captain America 4 ticket?
no, but yeah, we have a similar response to those movies. I mean, like Tarantino was saying, in a sense, movies are over because Hollywood is not making interesting movies anymore. They're doing wacky, gigantic movies to make a bunch of cash really fast. So, but in the indie sector and the foreign sector and VOD on TV, lots of interesting stuff is coming out all the time. And I see a lot of movies from people I know and people I don't know. So when I recommend something to critics, other filmmakers, and podcasters, it's a good one. It's going to be one that has some merit, or someone thinks it has some merit. So usually when I do that, it ends up working out.
Now, I will say there is an exception, and I'm going to be talking about this this coming week on the live stream. There was a Hollywood movie that came out this past weekend called Heart Eyes.
Hmm.
It's a slasher movie. The killer has these giant, kind of like glowing heart eyes on his mask, and he's a Valentine's Day killer. And I thought something you said kind of struck with me. It is a Hollywood production. It's very slick, a lot of beautiful looking people getting hacked up with state of the art technology, but it takes a bit of a chance in that it essentially takes one of those cheesy Hallmark holiday romance movies and places it in the middle of a slasher movie, and some of it works and some of it doesn't, but I can't say that I've seen that really before in a movie. So at some level it feels like somebody at a major studio said, "Hey, let's take a chance on something." And
Awesome.
it feels like that was the first time in like a decade that I can say that it sounds like that conversation was had.
Yeah, to get Hollywood back, for Hollywood to come back, they're going to have to start making interesting movies for grown-ups that
Yeah.
are unusual combinations, like what indies are and foreign filmmakers are doing, because there's so much entertainment options now. To expect people to go sit at a theater to watch a movie, you got to put out something super interesting. Just to plug before we wrap up, we have a conversation coming up about Hong Sang-soo movies,
Yes, sir.
episode 2 of my This Art House Life podcast, which is getting views, getting good feedback. I'm going to try to blow it up, and this is a topic that we should discuss down the road on or on some other episodes. Growing your YouTube channel, lots of ways to do it, and you're having some success with it. And inside the art house, just hit a milestone. They were monetized. They got their 4,000 views or whatever, or
Nice.
maybe their 3,000 views, something like that. Something positive happened. Um, the other thing I wanted to touch on that we can talk about on later shows is filmmakers have a lot of tools to, as they release their movies now, to cue people in, critics and regular people, as to how to watch their movie, right? Set up your website, set up your social media,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and tell people, listen, there are some aspects to the movie that's like this, but it's not supposed to be read that way. You know, this is what we were trying to do, right? Then when the audience goes in or critics take a look at it, they know at what point to, how to approach the work, basically. So use the amazing tools available to help set the stage, because people are just walking off the street, walking on from the street, literally at home or actually at film festivals and film screenings. They have no idea. You may have dealt with the subject for a couple of years by the time the movie's done, but the regular audience members and critics have no idea what they're dealing with.
You know, that's an interesting conversation to have. And we may have touched on this before, but I am not in the camp. And again, we're not having this conversation now because we're wrapping up. But I'm not in the camp that's in favor of that kind of disclaimer,
Mhm. They're not
or
disclaimers. I'm
what.
saying,
But keying the audience into this is how you should engage with the film. I feel like the audience is not just walking in off the street to watch a movie. They may be, but I feel like at some level is the filmmaker's responsibility to say, I'm not just making this movie for me and my friends. I'm making it for an audience. Now, if you want to make it for an audience of 5 people who are going to get it, regardless of what you put up there, that's fine. But if you want to get, more than 50 people, or if you want to reach 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people, you gotta put a different kind of hat on and say, all right, I've watched this. Is this outside of my own head at all? If not, then I need to kind of open up a window and invite people in to some degree without having to say, well, this is what I meant to say, or you wouldn't get this because you haven't had
that,
XYZ life
that's not at
experience.
all what I'm talking about.
Then help
So,
me out here, because that's what I picked up
no, 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 no,
from
no.
what you had
Listen,
said.
when someone sends me a movie and it's a 90-minute movie, I do I try to look at trailers. I try to look at websites and content reviews related to that movie. So uh, if it's so the filmmaker benefits by creating their version of how they, what the movie is by doing the introduction to the movie. So that's what I'm saying. I want to get more information. I don't want to go in completely cold into something. I want to know what they made, what they think they made, and what they think. This is just their opinion. Doesn't mean it's going to match up with with the audience expectations. Having that information out there is very useful to me as an audience member or a reviewer or a filmmaker. So what I'm saying is, regardless of how it's perceived, whether it works or not, if you're releasing a movie out to the world, put up a website with lots of information on it and what you think you did or what you think you're trying to say. So that helps me as an audience member. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I may not agree. I may be like, well, this take is completely crazy. Like if Marvel does, Hollywood does this. They try to sell Marvel movies like this is like a indie noir. This is like a self-discovery movie. I'm like, is it? Is it one of those movies? So
that's that that
I think that's what you're saying. Um, you know,
Sort of. I'll meet you halfway. I think having that information out there is good. Like, have a website, have a trailer or a Vimeo link or wherever people can watch the actual film, if that's a way that you're distributing it. Even have a director's bio or a filmography or something, because some people will find that interesting. But also, it should be something where if the link gets shared, like, hey, there's this crazy new movie coming out, there's an interesting new movie coming out, here's the person's website. The prospective customer, audience member should be able to go there, watch the trailer, watch the movie, whatever, without any prior knowledge. Because some people, I know lots of critics who don't want to know anything about a movie before they go in. They don't
yeah,
watch trailers,
so I agree
right?
with you. The prior knowledge, the additional information should not be the thing that unlocks the movie to people. I'm
Yes.
saying the movie needs to work by itself, uh, you know, within what's inside the movie, right?
Yeah.
But it could work better for some people if they have some like the autism issue, right? If Steve has a website where he talks about, we struggled with how to present this information. This is the way we went. It might not work for some people, but this is what we were trying to do with this character. Then, I mean, we're not going to read that first, but we'll watch the movie. Then if we have a question, we were
Yeah.
like, well, what was he trying to do with the autism thing? Then we can go and read that director's statement and go, oh, that's the approach they were trying to take.
Yeah. And that's an excellent, that's an excellent idea. Um, but yeah, we'll definitely we'll dig into this as a possibly a 19-part series because there's a lot to talk about here. But no, man, I again, I really thank you for introducing me to Steve Martini's work, to this film. It was real, you know,
And come on the show, Stephen.
yes, come talk to us.
Right.
But no, I like it because it's challenging. It forces me to have my brain on the entire, 90 plus minutes. So yeah, so folks, again, the Eventbrite link is below. If you're free in NDC, that rhymed, on Valentine's Day, go check it out. And yeah, thank you, Sujewa, at all of your information and about 53 spaceships, about Cosmic Disco, Detective Renee, World Philosopher, all of that stuff, everything you're working on is also going to be linked down below. But yeah, any parting words, sir?
I will see you on the 16th when we battle over Hong Sang-soo movies. This Art House Life, episode 2. I'm promoting it. One of the ways that I'm promoting it is as Rumble on the internets. Sujewa and Ian, Sujewa versus Ian on Hong Sang-soo movies.
I'll bring out the boxing gloves or my Hulk hands from the new Captain America movie.
Awesome.
Yeah, so looking forward to that one, man. All right, well, thank you, Sujewa, and thanks, folks out there. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you and take care. Hey, everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see, but if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.